What's that, Helldivers? You're saying that a live service game doesn't have to be a sleazy, unfinished, repetitive pile of slop that should bring shame to the studios that make it? Huh. Because it seems lately the whole industry is trying to gaslight me into thinking the word quality is a myth. Hello Internet, it's me, Koji. Bet you didn't expect to see this today. Don't worry, the yellow guy is still there, I'm just doing a little bit of experimenting. So Helldivers 2. Don't lie to me, you didn't know this game was coming either. For those of you unaware or those who have gotten democracy cock-blocked by the automaton server goblins, Helldivers 2 is a 4-player co-op horde shooter that's a parody of Starship Troopers. It's also a sequel to Helldivers 1, a top-down shooter that no one has ever heard of or played because it was released on the PS Vita. I feel like this is part of this unspoken genre of games that just appear seemingly out of nowhere and are just instant bangers, and you can't convince me that this is anything but, because the internet is going wild over it. Now, I don't know how they did it, but somehow Helldivers 2 got a severe and chronic case of rock dwarf syndrome. As the moment that you get into a game, you're immediately linked into a hive mind, where everyone speaks, acts, and thinks the same. The name of this element, of course, comes from Deep Rock Galactic, which has too many similarities to pass off. Both games are 4-player co-op shooters with friendly fire that take place in space with high-tech weaponry, where you shoot yellow bugs and occasionally robots. Both have loud, repeatable, rallying catchphrases that feature a cast of characters that are all equally enthusiastic about their cause. In Deep Rock, it's rocks and stones, and in Helldivers, it is, of course, democracy. Through this and just being a good video game, they have somehow cultivated this culture around the game that, while yes, is quite absurd from an outsider perspective, I'd say is actually quite a positive one, considering that the alternative is a fan base that hates the game and each other, which honestly I don't think we need any more of. And none of this is possible by just having an over-the-top premise and setting, but it needs to be an actual good game, which Helldivers definitely is. Helldivers 2 is a third-person shooter, which means, of course, you're going to be doing a lot of third-person shooting. So the question now is the shooting good? Yes. Yes, it is. Specifically, I want to talk about the feel of the shooting and the movement as a whole, which I can only describe as being unique. And I'm not saying unique in the way that Cruelty Squad is, where they make doing basic things different because they can, I guess. And it's not like it's unresponsive, because it absolutely is. But something about it feels distinctly human and grounded in reality, which sounds weird, yeah, I know. The UI is also the same. Your aim down reticle isn't static, it will move around as you do, and I feel like this next thing is a learning curve for everyone. You can't just impulsively reload after every kill. You do drop everything left in the magazine, as well as not actually showing the number on how many rounds are left. All this and more makes the game feel pretty realistic. I mean, as a whole, it treats you as the player as just a guy, just an everyday soldier. You're incredibly squishy, so you die quite quickly, and there are even injuries specific to body parts that hinder you in specific ways, which, can all be solved by a stim. Which admittedly kind of throws out my realism argument. I'm not exactly sure how a needle full of magic potion will cure a broken arm while you're actively running away from the creature that broke it, but that's Helldivers. There are also ragdolls. Listen, back in 2006, I don't know what Gmod infected us all with, but it feels like any game that has funny ragdolls is just instantly 2 points out of 10 better than the rest. Listen, it's a bit of a side tangent, but we gotta talk about this UI, specifically the crosshair. Because yes, I wrote a whole section on the crosshair. Generally enough, I feel that a game is the sum of all of its parts. Though also, as an industry, we've gotten pretty comfortable with the standard crosshair. You know, a dot with lines showing the spread, etc, etc. And it's the same idea here, lines for the spread, a dot in the middle. However, the dot will be exactly where your bullets are going all the time. But when you start moving around or shooting, the dot will run away from you. I know it's such a small detail, and in reality it really isn't anything new. I mean, most games do have some sort of pattern or predictable way that a bullet will spread, but having the visual of it, I don't know. This is just a little seemingly stupid thing that changes the entire feel of the gunplay, even though I know it's literally just 2 lines in a circle. It even disappears when you're not aiming down sights. So in those hectic moments when you're running away and shooting at the same time, it creates these desperate running gun situations where you have no idea where your shots are going to hit. It just adds to the chaos, which this game absolutely thrives on. Yeah, I really like the crosshair, but everything that I just said can be thrown right out the window because there's an alternate firing mode. I know they probably just added this for all the Call of Duty gamer bros, and yeah, it does the job perfectly fine, but honestly, it does kill the intended feel to the gunplay. Now, I think it's time that we talk about stratagems. Now, if you would have told me that there's a game where playing Dance Dance Revolution would have resulted in the total and painful annihilation of my enemies, I'd say, neat. Where do I sign up? These are essentially commands that you send to your ship. It's how you do crazy shit like drop precision missiles straight into the enemy strongholds. And honestly, not only is it the most dangerous part of being a Helldiver, it's also the most dangerous to the Helldiver and his team. Because let's not forget, there's friendly fire, and missiles don't pick favorites. At the start of every mission, you get to choose up to 4 stratagems, with a few that are just given to you whenever you start. And unlike your weapon choices, which I believe is mostly up to your own personal preference, and for the most part doesn't really need to be changed on a mission-to-mission basis, stratagems are a completely different ballgame. Partly because different kinds of explosions affect different kind of enemies differently, and if there's a hole in your party's lineup, then you could very well fill whatever role is missing. And these don't just strictly blow things up either, there's a lot of supportive options as well. There are, of course, many different flavors of boom that you can choose from, ranging from tickle to a goddamn nuclear weapon. But there are also sentries, resupply boxes, utility packs, and heavier weapons which don't come from your normal loadout. I do really like a lot of the support weapons here. My personal favorite is the autocannon, because I don't really like dealing with low to mid armored enemies in the intended way, but it does require a backpack to reload, so if I end up playing a mission that requires a back slot of something else, you can't go wrong with just a good old-fashioned box machine gun. I do particularly like the Eagle category of stratagems, acting like smaller fighter ships that can deploy multiple times in quick succession, but only have a certain number of uses before you have to send it back to reload. It's a small extra bit of immersion that really stands out to me, especially since from a purely design standpoint, it seems largely unnecessary. While your choice in regular weapon will determine how effective you could be, honestly, 70% of your damage and effectiveness will be done through stratagems, whether you're using offensive ones or are supplying your team with guns and shield packs. Now, the enemies. There are 2 enemy factions that you'll be using these stratagems on, the Terminids and the Terminators. The Terminids are faster and more feral with their attacks. They're bugs, so of course, generally attacking in unorganized swarms with very few ranged units. They come from underground burrows, some of which you can close with explosives. These are what the tutorial will teach you to fight. On the other side of the coin, the automatons are the exact opposite. Much more organized and such, with most preferring to rain bullets on you instead of doing the dirty work up close. The first game apparently had a 3rd enemy faction, these aliens that are not currently present in this game, but with the way that the update cycle has been, I have a feeling we'll just wake up and they'll just be there one day. But out of the 2 enemy types that we do have, I definitely prefer fighting the Terminids. I want to say that both are equally difficult, just with different specific difficulties about them, but I feel it's much more fun to gun down a bug that's charging towards you instead of some robot that's been taking pot shots from a mile away. Honestly, I think the strongest aspect of Helldivers 2 is not only how it can create, but also capitalize on the element of panic and chaos. Of course, any game can artificially create chaotic moments, but with those, it can sometimes feel forced and just more overwhelming than fun, which honestly is more just a headache. Here, at least once every other match, you'll be finding yourself turning a corner and seeing an armada of enemies or being hopelessly surrounded by bugs. Both situations, of course, will probably kill you. But a combination of balancing, ragdolls, and just overall game feel really makes these feel just fun rather than overwhelming. I would definitely describe the game as panic-fueled, but like the good kind of panic. It also avoids common annoyances like grunts becoming bullet sponges at higher difficulties. Instead, it just gives you more of that enemy to fight alongside new enemies that come with their own difficulty tweaks. Because honestly, I'd much rather magged up into a group of little bugs than just focus on only one. And I'm confident that most people would agree. Speaking of difficulty, the game has a lot of options, ranging from easy 1 to Helldivers 9. There are actually a few things that these change. I said before that health and damage of the enemies will not change, but on the harder missions, not only will you have more variety in the enemy selection, there will also be a lot more of them, which I think is the best way to balance a horde shooter. It also changes what kind of samples will show up, so there's an incentive to take on harder challenges. But I do think most people will be fine to settle into their sweet spot. Personally, I'm not super good at the game, so for automatons, I think 4 is about the right difficulty, and for the terminids, it's about 5. This is about where I think I can skirt by completing the missions without necessarily steamrolling it, or just being destroyed the moment that I get into a firefight. Now, this is the part where we have to get into something that I don't necessarily want to talk about, but I do think it's important. Helldivers 2 is a live service game. Yes, this game does have paywalled power, and repetitive game loops, and FOMO, and an always online requirement. However, I feel like with all these, there needs to be a giant kinda right in front of them. This game proves that there is a respectable and fair middle ground between profit/engagement optimization and pro-consumer practices, and I believe this wholeheartedly. Because, like I said, there's a middle ground that exists for all of this, and I think that this game doesn't deserve to be lumped in with some other games that have the same things. Since the game does have gear progression largely done through paid battle passes, there is absolutely an argument to be made that it is pay to win. Which, like, kinda? See, you do need to use the premium currency to unlock the passes past the first one, which is free. But not only do you still have to actively play to complete them, they never expire, and will always be here for you to unlock or leave alone forever. Plus, even though it takes a little bit of time, the game does hand out super credits pretty often, even if in small batches, which honestly I think is fine, since by the time you'll complete one pass, you'll likely only be a few hundred credits away from getting the next. Plus, I do feel like most of the paid passes offer more side grade weapons rather than just straight upgrades. Now, the fear of missing out. There is a rotating armor shop and timed missions. That's really about it, and neither of these things I feel are pushed too hard onto the player or are too important to just ignore. In fact, the only FOMO part of the game that genuinely gets me is how the planet liberation works. And this is a purely me thing, because I have been wanting to fight on Mavalon Creek ever since the game came out, but every time that I get on to play, it's already done, or just not available. This is 100% just a nitpick, but it bummed me out on more than one occasion, so I felt that I had to put it in the video somewhere. Always online. Honestly, I don't have a defense for this one. We all saw at launch how this live service limitation kind of ruined the moment for a lot of people. Something tells me that we will be getting an offline mode at some point, but I don't know. To me, it seemed that an online requirement for a game that you can play by yourself just seems like an unnecessary restriction that I wish would just stop happening in games. So, yeah, Helldivers 2 does have a lot of this live service junk, but only on a technicality. I know that the option to spend is clearly there, but I don't feel for a second while I'm playing this game that it's trying to do nothing more than just squeeze every last penny and second from me, which is refreshing in today's landscape, and I hate the fact that that's something that stands out so much. But yeah, Helldivers 2 is an amazing game, and is exactly what we needed. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't particularly ready to make this video, partly because of the whole part of the equation. But hey, let me know what you think. This is completely different for me, and for the most part, well, I don't know if I had fun making it, because I imagine editing this video is going to be the worst. But, yeah. This is actually my second time recording, because the first time, it didn't occur to me until halfway through recording that I didn't have a shirt on, because between having 2 PCs and 2 bright lights shining on me for like an hour when my fan has to be off to not affect the mic and also make this more unorganized, it was getting really hot, so I just took my shirt off like after the first paragraph. I'm like, wow. Oh boy, I feel a whole lot less stuffy in here, but you guys don't want to see that, so I had to re-record it. What fun. Anyway, let me down in the comments if you liked this video. I don't know if I'll be doing another of these, but I wanted to try something new, so do let me know what you thought about it.